Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So as you probably know, there's a lot of uncertainty for the NHL this season when it comes to the 2020 NHL Draft and when it is going to happen. From recent reports and speculation that I've seen across social media especially, there's a strong possibility of the 2020 entry-level draft happening around early June versus, say, late June like it normally does, with the possibility of the draft happening even before the regular season and or playoffs picks up. So that is pretty crazy, but we're going to see what happens. But as there's plenty of uncertainty regarding that, I thought it would be a perfect time to start talking about things regarding the NHL draft, as it's probably closer than we all expected. But with that being said, I'm going to discuss now 5 teams for the NHL this season that I fully expect to benefit the most out of all the other teams in the NHL, all in connection with the 2020 NHL draft. So what does that mean? Well, what I'm saying is that given draft position, the type of players that will be available, and the amount of picks that these certain teams have, they will definitely benefit the most out of all the other teams in the NHL with this draft. So starting off my list, I have at number 5, and I don't really have a particular order. I just have them numbered 5 to 1. But at number 5, I have the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens are definitely going to benefit a lot from the 2020 draft. And starting off with the fact that they have 14 picks total in this year's draft, which is currently first in all the NHL. So that is crazy, let alone all the other things that factor into this. They only have one first-round pick, unlike some of the other teams on this list, but that isn't really going to change much. So assuming right now that without anything happening when it comes to draft lottery, changing certain positions, the Canadiens would currently pick 8th in the NHL draft without anything else changing. So what does that mean? Well, the players that will possibly be available for them around that time are, of course, Sanderson, who is a left-handed defenseman, and, of course, Holtz, who I don't think is going to be left all the way at number 8 for them, but we'll see what happens. The Sabres do pick above the Canadiens, and they make a lot more sense, in my opinion, to acquire a guy like Holtz because they need wingers for sure. But it wouldn't surprise me if, say, the Sabres do skip out on a better talent like Holtz, and then he goes to the Canadiens possibly, because I don't know, if you're the Canadiens, how do you not get a guy like him? But Sanderson makes a lot of sense given the fact that they do need help on defense, especially on the left side, even with them recently signing Alex Romanov from the KHL. So that's going to be very interesting what happens there. But besides that, the Canadiens, they have 6 picks in the first 3 rounds, which is tied for second in all of the NHL when it comes to picks for this year's draft. And they have currently, like I said, 14 total picks, which is first out of all the other teams in the NHL leading up to this draft. So it's going to be very interesting what happens with the Canadiens, but given all the picks that they do have, it seems like even if they say don't trade up and get more than 1 pick in the first round, they're going to do more than fine. This is an unbelievably deep draft as well, one of the best drafts in all the NHL, which is what a lot of reports are saying. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out, and the players, because of course they need to develop right and blossom in order for this draft to be as coveted. So years down the line, we will really find out how good this draft was. But next on my list now, on number 4, I have the New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers I have for many reasons, starting off with the fact that they have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, which is currently tied for 3rd among the other teams with, of course, multiple picks especially. But the picks that they would have right now would be around the 13th overall pick, which is where they would currently stand, given their standings being a couple points out of a playoff spot, and the 23rd overall pick, which would be the pick that they would receive from the Carolina Hurricanes, as the Hurricanes have 2 first-round picks this year, so the Rangers would receive whichever one is worse between the two when it comes to positioning. But besides that, they, of course, have four picks in the first 3 rounds in this year's draft, which is tied for 4th around the NHL, and then they have 10 total picks out of this entire draft, which is also tied for 4th among all other teams in the NHL. So the Rangers have plenty of picks to choose from, and those 2 first-round picks can really be huge for them if they are given the possibility to trade up. Now, there's a lot of speculation that that might not be a possibility, so we will see what happens. But if they are able to, then it would not surprise me at all to see them do that. But the Rangers, some possible players that they will pick with these picks, especially the 13th pick, of course, you have Quinn, who's viewed by many as one of the better goal scorers in all of the 2020 draft. He will can possibly fall out of the top 10 and land with the Rangers at number 13. It would make sense because the Rangers are looking for some depth on the wing, especially on the right wing, so that would be a strong pick for them. And of course, you also have to look at guys like Andre, who's a left-hand defenseman, who could possibly be picked as well, or Zari, however you pronounce it, the centerman. Those are two players I could see the Rangers picking one of the two with the 23rd overall pick, assuming that the positioning doesn't change at all. But I just threw that out there. Quinn seems like a lock if he does land around 13 that the Rangers would get him if they don't trade up. And when it comes to the deeper pick around the 23rd pick, I could see one of Zari, and Andre. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But the Rangers, of course, do have plenty of picks in the later rounds in this year's draft, and I fully expect them to do well. As a Rangers fan, I'm very confident in the Rangers and their scouting, and I fully expect them to make a lot of big moves and make things happen when it comes to the type of guys that they acquire. They have done great in recent years with this kind of retool, rebuild, whatever you may call it, and that has all been hand in hand with their scouting and the type of players that they have been drafting. So with all that being said, now at number 3, I have the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings I have easily on this list just for the full speculation or assumption I should say, that they will get the first overall pick. And if they do, that is going to be Alexis Lafreniere. I highly doubt that it will be any other player. Maybe Stevie Y has something up his sleeve and he takes Tim Stenzel, however you may say it. But it'll really surprise me if Detroit lands the number 1 pick and does not take Alexis Lafreniere. But besides that, they also have 6 picks in the first 3 rounds, which is tied for second in all of the NHL. And they have 10 total picks, which is tied with the Rangers and I believe 1 or 2 other teams for 4th in all the NHL. So Detroit has plenty of picks to go from, and regardless of where they're picking, they're going to be high right in the beginning of the round, as they were the worst team in the NHL this season. So unless the lottery changes things for them and they land out of that first overall spot, and I really don't see that happening, but of course it is a possibility you have to consider, I fully expect the Detroit Red Wings to do a fantastic job in this year's draft. I'm a huge fan of Stevie Yzerman and the things he's done with the Tampa Bay Lightning and what he did in his first draft year in the 2019 draft as a GM for the Detroit Red Wings. Moritz Seider was a perfect pick that many slept on and did not expect him to be drafted as high as he was, but it seems like he's going to be one of the more coveted prospects in all of the NHL, not just now, but going forward. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the Red Wings, but I fully expect them to do a fantastic job and definitely benefit from this year's draft. Now, at number 2 on my list, I have the New Jersey Devils. The Devils doing the type of moves that they did at this past season's trade deadline really benefited them here. So they currently have 3 first-round picks in this year's draft, which is insane given how good this draft is supposed to be, which is also tied for first among the NHL when it comes to those first-round picks. So as of right now, you can expect the Devils to pick 6th overall, which would be their actual pick, 10th overall, which would be the Arizona Coyotes pick that they acquired in the Taylor Hall trade earlier in the season, and 17th overall with the Vancouver Canucks pick. But the Canucks pick is interesting because as of now, that's a conditional pick, which means that pick will only stay for 2020 and not 2021 if the Canucks make playoffs. But if they don't make playoffs, that conditional pick will become a 2021 first-round pick. Now, that's odd considering the fact that the Canucks are currently sitting out of a playoff spot. Not by points. They are tied in points with the last wildcard spot, but they are lacking 1 win. They are 1 less win behind the person in front of them, the team in front of them in the playoff spot and the wild card. So it's very interesting to see because as of right now, technically speaking, they should not have that 17th pick, but things can change. And if Vancouver does make the playoffs, given a different change in playoff format, or the regular season does pick up and they do get in it, then the Devils will acquire that 3rd first-round pick. And then in total, they have 8 total picks in this year's draft, which is tied for 7th in all of the NHL. And possible players that they can pick with these draft picks, well, especially at number 6, you have to think they're going to go with Drysdale, the right-hand defenseman. He's viewed as, in my opinion, especially the best defenseman in this year's draft. And the Devils definitely need some help on that blue line. And then, of course, you look at around the 10th pick, which would be the Coyotes pick. Cole Perfetti definitely stands out to me as a guy that they would get. He's a center and a left winger as well. And then you look at the 17th pick, what they might do, they can maybe take a right winger like Jarvis or Mercer. I really couldn't pick between the two, but I assume those 2 forwards to be around that spot, so expect the Devils to pick one of the 2 if they do acquire Vancouver's pick for this season. But with all those things being said, I expect a lot when it comes to the New Jersey Devils. I fully expect them to have a great draft. And really, as a Rangers fan, I'm not overly happy, of course, but there's no ill will, like no bad blood when it comes to that. I fully expect them to do a great job, and they really have a chance to take a significant jump in what was originally not supposed to be a rebuild going into this season, but now kind of is. Putting great winners, whether it be the likes of Perfetti or Jarvis Mercer, or if even they trade up in the draft, who knows? But that is definitely going to help the likes of a young Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. They have great young promising players, and if they can add on that blue line, of course with Ty Smith, who's their top defensive prospect, a lot can change for the Devils and a lot quicker than maybe one would have expected. But now on my list, on number 1, I have the Ottawa Senators. This was the easiest one. I'm sure you expected this all on. But the Senators, going into this draft for a year now, we all expected a lot that Alexei Lafreniere could definitely fall in their laps. It's still a possibility, but as of right now, they wouldn't have the first overall pick unless the draft lottery changes things. But they have 3 first-round picks like the Devils, which is tied for first in all the NHL this year. So those picks would, as of right now, given the standings, would be the 2nd overall pick, which is currently the Ottawa Senators, the 3rd overall pick, that is the San Jose Sharks that they acquired in the trade with Erik Karlsson. So that worked out a million times better than I think they ever expected it to. And they also have the 21st pick in the first round that belongs to the New York Islanders when they traded J.G. Pageau. So that's very interesting. And then, of course, they have 9 picks in the first 3 rounds, which is first in the NHL. And they have a total of 13 overall picks in the NHL for this year's draft, which is currently 2nd. So possible players that they can pick in the first round also will, of course, be guys like Quinn Byfield, the centerman, Lucas Raymond, the right winger, and then, of course, when you get to some of the other picks as well, you have guys like Mysek and Grands. Mysek is a center slash left winger, and Grands is a right defenseman. I expect Grands because I think they would appreciate more of the defensive help, given the prospects they already have on the offensive front, and given how well they're probably going to do just with their first couple picks, they could very well get both Byfield and a Raymond, which is absolutely insane. But all those things considered, I fully expect the Ottawa Senators to take a huge jump in their rebuild, and I expect them to really be contenders, playoff contenders at least, within the next 2 to 3 years. They are going to have an unbelievably talented roster, especially on the offensive front. They're finally starting to do this rebuild right after kind of doing it finicky originally, in my opinion. But things are definitely turning the tide for the Ottawa Senators, and in a great way. I expect a lot from them, and if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you have to be ecstatic going into this year's draft. It is viewed as arguably the best draft in recent history. So who knows what's going to happen looking down years down the line, but it's going to be very interesting to say the least. But with all those things being said, that is going to conclude this video. So if you like this video, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all those great things. If you haven't checked out my previous videos, make sure you do. I'll have links right down here below for you to check out previous videos, as I just do current NHL content regarding not just this season, but overall, and things that I feel should be made a video of, and this was definitely one of them. So once again, thank you all so much, and I'll be back in a day or two.